Thanks for that introduction, David. So like David mentioned, my name is George Angeles. I am the weed management farm advisor covering Tulare, Kings, and Fresno counties. I basically do weed management in just about any crop, so both agronomic and permanent crops as well. I figured I'd give a talk about a weed that probably doesn't get mentioned a lot and doesn't get talked about, and there's not a lot of information out there in terms of effective control methods on how to manage this weed. I'd say this weed is a very specific weed that some pistachio growers and now some citrus growers are also facing, and we are starting to see it also in table grape vineyards, and there's not a lot of information about this weed, so I kind of wanted to shine a little bit of light and just talk about some of the stuff I've been doing in trying to find effective control methods for this particular weed. So Silverleaf Nightshade is part of the Solanaceae family, very similar if you're familiar with black nightshade and hairy nightshade, which we have also in California, and both of those two weeds are very problematic in different vegetable crops. What makes this one very different from those is that it's an actual true perennial weed. So basically what that means is that it will actively grow during the spring and summer months, and it will go dormant during the winter time. So you only have some sort of window to try to control it before it goes dormant. Compared to some of the other nightshade species that we have, I mean, it's very deep rooting. I would say that it produces a lot of lateral growth compared to some of the other nightshades. It can grow between 1 to 3 feet tall, but I've definitely seen it a lot taller than that, especially in areas where it gets enough water. And so because it's a perennial weed, it tends to reproduce by seeds and root fragments, which we refer as rhizomes. So it has a lot of those perennial characteristics, and it shares those same characteristics with other perennial weeds such as Johnson grass and field bindweed. One of the main things where we normally encounter it would be in a lot of rangeland and grass pasture. We're always trying to control it in some of those areas, mainly because it's poisonous to livestock. And so this is what it looks like. Usually the little seedlings have a dull green appearance, and that's mainly because those leaves have small little dense white hairs on it and some trichomes, which makes it look like it's very grayish. As the weed continues to develop, it starts to produce these bright purple flowers with yellow centers. And sometimes the flowers can vary between white to blue, but it's very much the same type of plant. And eventually it starts to produce these green berries that are striped. Oh, can't point. Well, and as those berries mature, they turn yellow, and that basically means that those seeds inside those berries have set and they can be viable for a couple of years. As far as how common it is in California, I mean, you can find it just about any place in the San Joaquin Valley. There's a couple of different hotspots, I would say, in Kern County and in parts where the Tulare County and Kings County line up, and also where the Tulare County and Kern County counties also kind of overlap. It does favor berry disturbed areas, so normally you'll see it sometimes in a lot of roadsides in fallow area that's getting continuously tilled sometimes to try to control the weeds. It grows in a wide range of different soils, so it can grow in soils that have alkaline issues and salinity issues, and it can pretty much tolerate just about any type of weather condition as well. So higher temperatures. It can grow in areas where there's low rainfall, and just a variety of different soil conditions. And so what does the typical life cycle of the silverleaf nightshade? I mean, it starts germinating usually in the spring and into the summer months, and as well as by rhizomes. And they both have different weather conditions or soil temperatures where, that the plants will emerge in those months, and it will actively grow from spring to fall, which means that there's this huge window where it's actively growing, and at the same time, during different times of the year, it will produce flowers and it will produce fruit. So more or less, you'll probably see, if you have this weed, you'll probably see a lot of different flushes within 1 year. And usually during the winter time, once those temperatures drop to freezing temperatures, it will, the above ground part of the plant will die off, and it will overwinter with the rhizomes that are in the soil. And so this is just a basic illustration or summary of what I just explained. I mean, the main thing to look at here is, just the way this perennial plant kind of reproduces and spreads out. So if you can see, all those little plants are connected to the same established plant, and so they all form some type of network. And not just do you normally get sprouting from the rhizomes, but you're also getting seedlings from seeds. So I mean, it can be a very it can actually spread very quickly and become a huge problem. And so usually in a population, you'll have 3 different sets of plants. You'll have stuff coming from seeds, and you'll have more plants coming from the lateral root growth, and you'll have other plants that are coming from the rhizomes at different times of the year. So it's almost like a never-ending battle if you have established Silverleaf Nightshade in your orchard. And so this is just an example of a plant that I kind of dug up in a very sandy soil, and we kind of measured the lateral root growth was about 2 feet, but in other places we've seen it up to 3 feet on both sides of the plant. So and from studies that have been done in other states like Texas, it's been documented that 1 inch root fragment of that lateral root growth buried up to 2 inches deep, can produce 2 new shoots. So if you were to till this plant in the middle, what you're doing is not just knocking down that weed, but you're also spreading some of those little root fragments that can potentially turn into new plants. So why is controlling Silverleaf Nightshade important? Well, I mean, we've been seeing it more on recently planted pistachio orchards. They actively compete, similar to other weeds, they actively compete for resources. If they're left uncontrolled, they can actually cause a reduction in vigor in some trees. They can adapt to a wide range of different soils, so that weed tends to thrive in alkaline and salinity soils. It's very drought tolerant, so normally it will start growing in areas that are very dry. Because it's a perennial weed, it can actually spread through root fragments, and so any practice like mechanical tillage, I mean, it's very that's not something that I would suggest doing, mainly because what you end up doing is not just knocking down those plants, but you're also spraying a lot of those small little root fragments that have the potential to produce new plants. In hand weeding, it's also very difficult to control because you have to, in a way, you have to make sure that you're pulling the entire plant with the entire root system. If you leave any of those roots behind, they have the potential to create more plants. And besides the fact that it's very difficult to hand pull, mainly because it's got a deep root system, and the plants also have these little prickles that are like red to tannish color. And if you're not wearing any gloves, those things will get you. So it's very difficult to control with the tools that we have available. As far as chemical control, your pre-emergent herbicides, can be effective at controlling the plants coming that are popping up from the seeds. But as far as established plants, where you see a lot of resprouting from rhizomes, your pre-emergent herbicides aren't going to control that very, very effectively. So I mean, we kind of turn to to the use of post-emergent herbicides, and some of those even there's not a lot of information out there that we know that certain herbicides work very effective on this weed. So there's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to finding options for this weed. And so this is kind of the situation, that we're in, that we go and we spray, post-emergent herbicides like glyphosate and glufosinate, and then we come back a couple weeks after, and then you start seeing, all this new green growth, and you're thinking, well, maybe it's a new flush, and in reality, what it is, it's just new growth from those root systems, from those weeds that appear to be dead. And so this is this is kind of what the battle looks like, during the season. You go out there and you spray your post-emergent herbicides, and then you come back a couple weeks after, and you start seeing all these new weeds, and you're kind of thinking, well, the herbicides didn't work very well, and it's mainly because a lot of these established weeds have, a very high energy reserve in the root systems, and basically what it's doing, those herbicides are able to knock back, the foliage of some of those weeds, but it's using some of the energy stored in the root systems to kind of produce more shoots. And so if you start digging out, some of those, weeds that appear to be dead, you can see, on the picture to the right, that there's a whole bunch of new growth coming out from that rhizome. And so, we're stuck in situations like this. Why necessarily are we seeing silverleaf nightshade in pistachios and not almonds? And I think it's mainly because a lot of the pistachio orchards where we're seeing this, they have some salinity issues, they have some alkaline issues, and the soils tend to be very, I would say very more on the sandy loam side, very loose. So those are all favorable conditions for not just silverleaf nightshade, but other perennial weeds as well, like Johnson grass, field bindweed, and nutsedge. And what's interesting about silverleaf nightshade is also that it's allelopathic, so which means that the root systems will release this allelopathic chemical that kind of suppresses the germination of other plants. So usually, where silverleaf nightshade establishes itself, you probably won't see other weed species around it, mainly because it's allelopathic, so it prevents all other weeds from germinating. So it becomes the dominant weed in the orchard. And so during the winter months, when we think that it's dead, because for the longest time, most folks have thought that maybe this weed was an annual weed, similar to some of the other nightshades, and really it isn't. Here in the picture, like on these darker areas, you can see all the plants that were left uncontrolled that have berries, and you may think that they're dead, but they're not. They kind of just went into dormancy. They're going to survive because they have established root systems with enough of an energy reserve, and then next year you put your pre-emergent herbicides, and then you start seeing silverleaf nightshade pop up in some of those areas, and start to wonder why the pre-emergent herbicide didn't work. Well, it's mainly because you're seeing sprouting from those old root systems, and so it can be very tough to control with some of the tools that we have currently. And so now we're left, with situations like this where, we have full-length rows, not just, some areas or patches, where it's actively growing during the season, and, you can use a variety of different techniques, but it always comes back. Similar to if you've tried controlling something like field bindweed, it's very, very similar. And so as far as, control, with post-emergent herbicides, we do our best to try to control some of those weeds in between the trees where those weeds tend to be a little bit more competitive. But at the same time, we're left wondering, what do we do during in the tree middles? And so it can be expensive, to broadcast application, a couple of post-emergent herbicides, mainly because, tilling, you're just going to be spreading some of those rhizomes across the orchard. There's other things you can do, like mowing, like with the flail mower, and you could get decent control out of it, and it can be effective whenever those weeds start producing flowers before they set those berries. It's ideal. Those are ideal times when you'd want to do it, mainly because if you do that, then you're preventing those weeds from producing seeds, and you can possibly deplete the seed bank doing that. And so, that's just a closer look at, after, a flow mower has passed mowing some of these weeds, and you can get pretty good control out of it, but in a couple weeks, you'll probably see, enough weeds to make it look like, they didn't even go in with the flail mower. And so usually, whenever you do like tillage or you're mowing these weeds, I mean, you often create these very dusty conditions, which can bring a variety of different problems, not just, to pistachios, but to other neighboring orchards like almonds. And one of the main things that we've been seeing is that, whenever you do it, before you spray some of those weeds in between the trees, what it does is once that dust begins to settle, it actually settles on top of those weeds, and it actually, creates like a dusty barrier of soil on top of those weeds. And what that does is, whenever you're using herbicides like glyphosate, that glyphosate tends to bind to the soil and it makes it inactive. So a lot of your herbicide applications in which you're using something like glyphosate, they become very ineffective. And so, as far as herbicides, we have a lot of different options. Like I mentioned before, to the right, we have, your pre-emergent herbicides, which might be effective at controlling the weeds popping up from seeds. But as far as if you're in a situation where you're seeing a lot of established plants, they're really not going to do much. And so we kind of resort to, using post-emergent herbicides. And I would say that out of all these herbicides, the only ones that might not have, some sort of activity on Silverleaf Nightshade would be your selective grass herbicides that we normally use to control grass weeds. But, other than that, it's worth kind of evaluating the efficacy of some of these herbicides in combination, possibly to try to see, if there's a proper combination to use to effectively control some of the established plants. And so, talking about herbicides, there is a new herbicide that got currently registered in California for use in pistachios and almonds and I believe stone fruit and some other pome fruits as well. The name of the herbicide is called Hulk. The active ingredient is fluoroperoxyfen benzyl, and it belongs to the same herbicide group as, if you're familiar with 2,4-D and dicamba. So it should have a very similar activity, and because of that, it only controls broadleaves. So in other places, like I mentioned, where we see Silverleaf Nightshade in rangeland and grass pasture, we normally try to control, we do have some success at controlling it with dicamba and trichloropyr, which both of those two herbicides belong to this herbicide 4 group. So there is hope that, with this new herbicide being in that, having that same mode of action and belonging to, to that same herbicide group, that it might have some activity on Silverleaf Nightshade and other perennial broadleaf weeds as well. The main difference between this herbicide and something like 2,4-D is that this herbicide is going to be a little bit more safer because it's non-volatile. So you are going to have the freedom to apply it at least twice a year. The main thing about this herbicide, and that's something that we've only seen or used, is an MSO adjuvant. We haven't tried any other adjuvants with it, but I would say that with MSO, it probably has its highest weed control efficacy. And as far as broadleaf weeds, it does control several different annual weeds, but the main ones to keep in mind would be like the hairy fleabane and the horseweed, which are glyphosate resistant, and they can be very tough to control if they begin to bolt up in the spring. As far as potential tank mix partners, it is compatible with other systemic herbicides like glyphosate and glufosinate. From what I was told from some of the Corteva reps, it's not really recommended, to be combined with some contact herbicides, and that's mainly because there's some contact herbicides that just work too fast, and it doesn't allow that herbicide to be translocated within the plant and to effectively work. So Currently, they're not suggesting anybody, mix this new herbicide with any of those, contact herbicides that just work too fast. But one of the main things that I'm kind of talking about this herbicide is mainly because, we included some treatments that had that new herbicide in one of our herbicide studies where we were working in this pistachio orchard that was heavily infested with Silverleaf Nightshade. And so, the main objectives of that particular study was to, one, test the efficacy of this brand new herbicide, Hulk, and its efficacy in Silverleaf Nightshade, and also evaluate potential tank mix combinations and sequential applications, mainly because in previous studies that I've done, we've sprayed once and we come back about 5 to 6 weeks after and we see just so much weeds resprouting, and some of those treatments have not been very effective just doing one application. So maybe this time doing 2 sequential applications, that might have a little bit better weed control efficacy. And also, the last objective of this study was to evaluate the efficacy of doing a sequential application in comparison to a single dose or a single application at a very high rate, and see how it compares versus doing, sequential applications, maybe 30 days between, versus possibly waiting, maybe 45 days and then coming in with a higher dose and see if it can actually control some of those weeds. And so this is what those treatments look like. The main ones to point out, in the first application, we have, a couple of different standalone treatments, and we have just different combinations of some systemic herbicides like Roundup and glufosinate in combination with some of those contact herbicides like Venue and Trivix and Goaltender. And basically we did the same application in the second time. And so 28 days after we did that initial application, we came in there again with the same combination, with the exception of the 2 top treatments that are highlighted in green. In those treatments, we were looking at possibly waiting for 28 days and letting the weeds grow, and then coming in there with a high dose of Roundup and glufosinate, and seeing if we were able to control some of those weeds when they get a little bit too big, and also doing Hulk in the first application, and then coming back with Hulk with a higher dose of Roundup to see if that makes any difference. And so as far as the weed control efficacy data, the treatments like that had the Trivix and the Venue with Venue plus glufosinate and Venue plus Roundup, and then the Goaltender plus Roundup, had probably the highest weed control efficacy. I would say that with the exception of the Hulk treatments, all the herbicides combinations had over 88% weed control efficacy, with some of those treatments with the Trivix and the Venue probably having a higher weed control efficacy just at the 28 days after the first application. So when we went in there, when we came back and did a second application, we waited 30 days and then we came back and looked at the plots, and for the most part, the weed control efficacy of some of those treatments actually, improved, but there was a lot of variability, and that is the reason why, there's not much mean separation. So it's statistically, they're not too different, but visually, you can actually see some differences. As far as anything that we were able to track, that was plants germinating from seeds, all those treatments effectively controlled the Silverleaf Nightshade seedlings, and so those herbicide combinations really have no issue controlling some of those small little seedlings. It's just the established plants that are the main problem. And so those are the 4 treatments that probably performed the best. So this is what they look like at 28 days after the first application. A lot of the weeds that you see there are weeds that probably popped up after we did the application, so they were missed. But it's kind of tough to see it, but there are a lot of weeds that are dead in some of those plots. And so what those plots look like when we came back with the second application and we came back 30 days after, this is what they look like. I mean, they're most of the weeds are pretty much dead in some of those plots. When we looked at the standalone Roundup and glufosinate treatments and then combination of Roundup plus glufosinate, again, I mean, there's a lot of weeds in some of those plots after that first application, and that's mainly because there was a lot of new plants that popped up after the application, and with those herbicides not having any residual activity, they're all misses. So when we came back 30 days, or we did the second application, we came back 30 days. I mean, they pretty much look fairly clean. That treatment that you see, the treatment one that's on the right corner with the high dose of Roundup plus glufosinate. We were able to burn back a lot of those bigger plants, but all those herbicides did at those high rates is kind of just defoliated the plants and left a lot of green stems on the plants. And usually when that happens is there's a lot more places where new growth will pop up in a couple weeks. So in comparison to the sequential applications of the Roundup and the glufosinate and then the combination, those other herbicide treatments perform better, even though they may look like they perform almost the same. And so, like the Hulk, again, you see not very good weed control efficacy. I mean, if you see at the bottom that Hulk by itself just didn't do very good. It almost looks similar to the untreated. And when we came back, with the second application, especially on that standalone Hulk, we came back with Hulk and glufosinate. We were able to burn back some of those weeds, but still we got a lot of different misses, mainly because the weeds were a lot taller in some of those plots. We didn't get very good coverage, so that really did have an impact on the overall weed control efficacy. So in summary, a lot of the ting mix combinations, they effectively work whenever we combine them with the glufosinate and glyphosate. Unfortunately, as a standalone treatment, the Hulk just didn't, provide very good control by itself. It does have what we did see in some of the combinations where we use Hulk with glufosinate and glyphosate is, we did see a very good reduction in new regrowth. So I mean, there is the possibility that with the right combination, that Hulk might potentially be effective once it actually enters the plants, but by itself it just we just didn't see very good efficacy in terms of controlling the Silverleaf Nightshade. And doing the sequential applications resulted in better control than doing one single dose at a later time, mainly because again a lot of the weeds were burned back after the first application, and that left very small populations of weeds left over. And so we got better coverage when we came back on the second application. And so some of the take-home points is, Silverleaf Nightshade is very competitive. It can adapt to a variety of different soil conditions. It's very problematic, mainly because it's a perennial. It can reproduce by seeds and root fragments. And so, minimizing tillage in heavy infested areas is always important, mainly because you really don't want to spread that weed to different parts of the orchard where that weed is absent. Mowing, if you do it at the right time, can prevent the production of seeds, and eventually it will actually deplete the seeds in the seed bank. And equipment sanitation is very important, mainly because in some areas where they're starting to see this issue, it's all in patches. So usually when you go in there with some type of mower, you have to really clean it up. If you go in an area with very dense populations, to try to ensure that you're not introducing that weed to other parts of the orchard where again it's absent. And consider using different combinations of pre and post herbicides. Application timing is very critical. You gotta go in there when the plants are smaller. You need to use herbicides with different modes of action. That way you reduce the risk of that weed developing any resistance to some of these herbicides. And consider doing fall applications mainly because during the fall, a lot of these plants are begin to transfer a lot of those carbohydrates into the root system. So there's a higher opportunity that those herbicides are gonna move into the root system and eventually kill the plants. And with that, I'll take any questions over this time.